So Manish, today we are doing life-centric. Oh, by the way, I just wanted to
Live,
say that
yeah, sure.
like, ये
Okay, no
लाइव
problem. No,
मनीष बाद में
no problem.
फोन पे बात करते
Yeah,
हैं.
sure. नमस्कार सभी पार्टिसिपेंट्स को भी नमस्कार और हमारे साथ रिस्पेक्टेड मैडम डॉक्टर अजंता सेन को भी नमस्कार. जैसा कि सभी पार्टिसिपेंट्स जानते हैं कि हम लोग फंडामेंटल्स ऑफ सोशल डिजाइन के ऊपर एक शॉर्ट टर्म सर्टिफिकेट कोर्स कर रहे हैं जो बनारस हिंदू यूनिवर्सिटी डिपार्टमेंट ऑफ अप्लाइड आर्ट फैकल्टी ऑफ विजुअल आर्ट मैरीलैंड इंस्टीट्यूट कॉलेज ऑफ आर्ट बाल्टीमोर मैरीलैंड यूएसए और मिशिगन स्टेट यूनिवर्सिटी के कोलैबोरेशन से हो रहा है. और इसी सिलसिले में जो हम लोगों का इस समय मॉड्यूल चल रहा है वो ह्यूमन सेंटर्ड डिजाइन है, जिसमें आज डॉक्टर अजंता सेन मैम जो कि आईटीसी बॉम्बे और नैन्यांग यूनिवर्सिटी सिंगापुर से हैं, ये लाइफ सेंटर डिजाइन के ऊपर आज हम लोग इस पे बातें करेंगे कि लाइफ सेंटर डिजाइन और सोशल रिलेवेंस में कैसे जाके सोशल डिजाइन में फिट हो पाती है और उसके क्या क्या डिफरेंट अप्रोचेज एंड एस्पेक्ट्स हैं, उसके बारे में आज हम फिर एक बहुत ही खूबसूरत लेक्चर मैडम से सुनेंगे और समझेंगे. मैम, आपका स्वागत है और मैं निवेदन करूंगा कि आप अपना लेक्चर स्टार्ट करें प्लीज.
Thank you, Manish. Good afternoon. Welcome to all our participants. Thank you for being here. Today's presentation starts with looking at the design approaches in a holistic way, where I place them in comparative assessment so that you can understand what produced what kind of design at what point in time, something that I did do last time. Uh, for example, just to recap from last time, we looked at human-centered design, but not before we tried to understand the overall interconnectedness of the design approaches, because by that time you had already heard Sir Puvaya speak on human-centric, user-centric design. And then I spoke about human-centric design at a level of abstraction higher than user-centric design. And today, as we speak, as we take up life-centric design approach, we are actually faced with a great deal of responsibility in trying to understand how each one of us as an entity has contributed negatively to our ecosystem in a way that life-centric design has been invoked. And the tragedy is that the term is often used as a fashionable, as a fashionable emblem, nothing more than that, because people are not really willing to make the necessary changes. Uh, Therefore, that makes us, it imposes an even larger responsibility on us to try to understand what human-centric design is. And just to say that if humans had practiced human-centric design in the way that I spoke last time, and not a level lower than human-centric design, which is user-centric design. User-centric design is a more functional, more individualistic form of human-centric design. Whereas when we talk about human-centric design, most of the time it aligns beautifully with social design, because it is about not just about yourself, but it's about extending yourself to humanity, whether it be your family, whether it be your community, whether it be people with certain disabilities, etc. But since human-centric design deteriorated to the level of market-centric and other forms of related, consumeristic forms of design, the path back to human-centric design itself became quite difficult, which was through ethnography. Once again, we tried to get ourselves back to some form of human-centric design, where human-centric design is essentially trying to humanize the technologies around us. And from then onwards, suddenly you find the introduction of the word life-centric design. And the word is, I think my primary concern is that the word is used so casually, just thrown everywhere, like it's some fashion statement, that we need, that it makes it even more important that we try to understand what it is. And like I always say, that since we are from from a society, a culture where social design, sustainability, etc., are sort of embedded into our DNA, it is not going to be difficult for us to understand that It's time to understand that. It's time to mull over it, and it's time to say, how can I actually use the word seriously and not, in the way that it's being used. So, therefore, uh, we go on to today's presentation, where uh, it's where my principal window into today's presentation is in presenting all the design approaches side by side along axis of time, and the reasons why each of the design approaches had arrived. What I'm going to show you here is this complete history of design approaches in the last 150,000 years, which by now you would have got quite familiar with, because I've been using that framework again and again, so that there is some sort of familiarity. So, as you can see, if we start from M, which is where machine got introduced, it got pitted against human centered design, because prior to the arrival of the machine, there was human centered design. The machine came and took away human centered design. And then came Age, which is where, after the pleas from different thinkers like William Morris, John Ruskin, and others, it went back to human centric design, practiced at Bauhaus, and as transported to the United States after Bauhaus closed down, and as, of course, transported also to the European continent through its own form of human centric design, where I'd spoken about Deutsche Werkbund, which was the parallel of arts and crafts. Then comes MK. MK is, of course, market centric design, which happened post Second World War, with affluence in America, America leading the way for design, and America setting the milestones for modernism. In that, America chooses to go the market centric way, making design completely appealing to a consumeristic mindset, and led by big industry and advertisement, and making a lot of design that had absolutely no use to people on the ground. And from there, we come to a stage where the digital technology comes in at people's level, and we begin to try to go back to understanding how can we recover the grounds for human centric, and push technology back, which we did manage to do through ethnography. And therefore, I would like you to imagine that I have one more block there which says age after the T. And then I come to A, which is a new form of behavior coming from the Homo sapien, that is anthropocentric. And I will talk about that, because that is the big lesson here for us in terms of what happened, why, when, and how. And we started with L. If you go leftwards, that was the cognitive revolution that led us after 150,000 years into the machine, industrial revolution. That's on the left. And on the right, you see A coming down into L through information revolution. So here is your interactivity, interconnectedness across the different design opportunities. Now, the next important thing for me to say here is that, and I raise a series of questions, which is, that I think beg answers, which is, we presume that our relationship with nature is symbiotic and hence life centric. Symbiotic is a word from cybernetics, from computing. As you can see, the word biotic is inside it. Symbiotic means reciprocal. Symbiotic means one feeds the other in a circular way, and symbiotic is a word that is always used in good connotations. So we always presume that our relationship with nature is symbiotic, and we continue to presume that. So the question is, in what ways is nature human symbiotic anymore? The second question is, if we have deviated from this principle of nature human as symbiotic by letting the human, that is people, the Homo sapien species, dominate nature through technology, then the question is, what is the characteristic of such a human who decides to dominate nature? And can we at all call that entity human? or should we rename that? Uh, the third question is, as we turn, as we now try to turn the tide back to what was once symbiotic relationship with nature, the question is, on what grounds do we intend to bring back life-centric design? Are we prepared for symbiotic relationship with nature? Have we shown signs of that? And if so, then where are those signs? And the last critical question here is our present clamor 500 years after we abandoned it, the clamor for life-centric design, which we abandoned 500 years ago, is that present clamor based on, firstly, consideration of ethics? Now, what I'm going to present to you now is very important, and these are questions that I would like you to ask from, as your personal question, as if everybody's life depended on it. Because understand that in social designing, how each one of us apply ourselves to ethics, morality, compassion, etc., will go to build the larger idea of social design. So, therefore, let's ask, this present clamor for life-centric design, what is it based on? Is it based on a sense of ethics, which means that ethics comes from a sense of duty? You say ethical ethical treatment to animals, ethical use of certain products. For example, what is it called? The ahimsa silk and all that. So that's an ethical use of a certain thing, so that you take off violence from from that ecosystem. Is it ethical considerations? Is it from a sense of duty, which is of course great, but not enough? Or compassion for nature, okay, which basically comes from a sense of morality, which means you have regret, you have remorse, afsos, kash maine aisa na ki hui thi, that is a different kind of thing. And morality is always higher than ethics, because if you don't have morality, you cannot give build a society with ethics. So, for example, ethical banking will happen. Ethical banking, for example, Islam has a form of ethical banking where they do not take interest. Now, ethical banking is fantastic, but are all their practices, uh, moral? There are so many things where the ethics of ethical banking, a lot of other things far outstrip the advantages of ethical banking, and that is true of many of our faiths. There are so many things we do, and then we undo them with a lack of morals. So are we trying to get back to life-centric design through a sense of compassion, that is through a sense of remorse, wish we had not treated nature badly? Or are we doing it out of a sense of sympathy? And I do not use the word empathy here. Sympathy is like pity. Sympathy is like, oh no, poor thing, wish I didn't do it. It is also slightly patronizing, because it's like you're saying, if you know what, let's go and save nature. You'll have a lot of posters, a lot of design students. They make these posters, we are out there to save nature, because they read those messages from designing that is getting done through firms, through iconic people who constantly speak about design thinking, and life-centric design. All these words are simply thrown out, and of course, as young students, you want to absorb them, but they're not giving you any space to think. So, when you say, let's save nature, is it in our hands to save something as big as nature? So, when I said human centric design, I try to elevate human centric design from the level of user centric design. User centric design is a functional thing. Human centric design has gravitas. It talks about social, the realm of social. It talks about the realm of the larger sense of humanity. Likewise, if you the word human carries such a lot of gravitas, you can imagine how much gravitas the word life carries. And therefore, I say that when you say, let's save nature, are we really, is it in our power to go and save nature and, so casually talk about saving nature? Or are we trying to do it from a functional sense of being, like out of a sense of sheer convenience? So, just the convenience of disposing plastic bottles in a different bin. It's a very functional thing to do. It's a good thing, but it's an extremely functional thing to do. So you could be creating a lot of carbon footprints traveling all over the world in flights, and घूमने जा रहे हैं आइसलैंड को, घूमने जा रहे हैं न्यूजीलैंड को, फ्लाइट में जा रहे हैं, और फिर यहाँ पे हम प्लास्टिक बॉटल वगैरह सेग्रीगेट कर रहे हैं। ये करना बहुत ज़रूरी है, पर वो करना, उसमें हमारा जितना कार्बन प्रिंट्स जनरेटेड हुई, how do you balance out the two, right? So this is functional, but at least at the functional level you get to say, okay, this is functional, there's no pretense of anything else. And lastly, and most importantly, are we trying to do it through, and to me, for me, this is the most important consideration. Are we trying to do it? Are we trying to do it by through a deeper sense of science, the kind of scientific reasons that have now been thrown up that are trying to make us understand why life-centric design is do or die. Okay, and I will come to that, and I will show you through scientific thinking why it's do or die. And in terms of depletion of our biosphere, in terms of destruction of life, so life support systems, such as three major life support systems, namely climate, which is air, the sea, rising seawater, heating up of the seawater, that's water, and of course biodiversity, which is on land. All three life support systems are threatened. And so is it about saving nature, and I say quote unquote saving nature, or is it about saving humanity? So it is in our control to save humanity. It's we cannot save God, we cannot save nature. That's too much beyond us. But what we can do is we can control our own behavior, and in a collective spirit we can, in the process, cumulatively we get to save humanity. So one of the things that the Homo sapiens did, that is our species, the human species did, was to accelerate the pace of what we popularly call progress, and and progress to achieve the goals of life on Earth. So the way we did it was to a spectacular compression of time. As you can see, we started off hundreds of millions of years ago, and then if you look at the watershed moments here, and we come down tens of millions of years ago. So we've spoken about millions of hundreds of millions of years ago, when organisms, etc., were born, and then tens of millions of years ago, then Homo sapien comes, and Homo sapien comes later. The multicellular organisms come. So first you have the single cellular, unicellular organisms called protozoa, millions of years ago. Then tens of millions of years ago, you have the metazoa, which is the multicellular, and moving on into mammals, that is humans. So we have humans, and then as soon as humans come and become Homo sapiens, we have the cognitive revolution, because distinguished mammals, other mammals from the Homo sapiens, was a sense of awareness, to be cognate, and that's how we have the cognitive revolution. And then tens of thousands of years ago, we built our tools, and from there, in tens of centuries, we built our, machines, and the all the different things which are closer to your time, and so you understand what these developments were, down to the digital revolution. And of course, you see that at the end I've added singularity. Singularity is a movement which is popular amongst a lot of AI scientists, starting with a very well-known AI artificial intelligence person from MIT. I don't seem to recall his name now. He was very derisive of the human system. It said that the human brain is nothing but a bunch of flesh. But look at the computer, how fantastic it is. So these bunch of scientists think that very soon, very, very soon, the computer is going to become more powerful than the human. And all the things that the human is capable of doing, all our cognitive skills, will get outpaced by the computer. So, including our emotions, including our compassion, including everything. And the day that happens, that will be the age of singularity. Most scientists don't believe that will ever happen, because the ability of the human is far deeper than the ability of computing. In fact, the first generation of computing that happened with mainframe computing was called dumb computing. And we are only like 40, 50 years since then. But the progress of computing and digital, which brought in digital technology, and where the scientists think it could lead to singularity. Some scientists, most scientists don't think that way. Singularity or not, the very rapid time compression, this progress has happened because of what we call the Moore's law, which came from someone called Geoffrey Moore, who was the who was heading Intel, and he came up with this prediction that every 18 months, the transistor, which is the chip inside our computing, will uh, will double in its processing capacity, and so it came to be known as Moore's law. So by Moore's law, our movement expectedly is going to be really fast. This is Geoffrey Moore, and that is how he predicted how fast we will get on to something called Internet of Things. Now, some of the I talked about ethics and I talked about morality, right? The Let's talk about the downside of these fabulous technologies that the scientists love talking about. Within a very short period of time, you could say within a period of years, simply years, not even a full decade, which in India is 12 years, yuga, half a decade, within a decade or half a decade, we have seen attitudes denigrate, led by technology. So there's a lot of arrogance towards the elderly, because you laugh at them because you think, oh no, they don't know how to do technology. You are neglectful and intolerant of children because you feel they are they ask too many questions and they are impatient, which is how children are meant to be. Your attitude towards women, alternate sexuality, genders, your attitude towards alternate socio-political views, your attitude towards anything that you don't agree with has become very intolerant. And you can see that in diverting good use of technology to bad use of technology, through trolls, through fake news, through phishing. Phishing is where you proxy the identity of a financial product like credit card, etc., and take out money. So basically, it's all deceit. And of course, your attitude, your sense of duty towards your elderly at home, such as your parents, have taken a beating because you privilege yourself as self. Your self, individual self, has today become more important than these collective spaces where your duty should have been directed. And therefore, naturally moving on from these to the highest level of abstraction, the duty towards life systems and nature, through which we are sustained, that attitude can't be any better than what we are doing to the rest of these component systems of society. Therefore, the question and therefore, are we asking the question uh, that our attitude towards society, not self, but towards society, is the original purpose of life. Today, it is the self which we feel is the main objective of life. But we've forgotten that it is society which is the original purpose of life. And in cultures like us, where we did value sustainability and such, uh, we have always placed society, community, family above self. And that is how actually most animals do. So, in other words, life centric design forces us to ask whether we are interested in correcting the above distortions and once again allow social design to flourish, or are we simply saying life centric design, whereas in parallel, all of these activities are also happening. So, there is an inconsistency between the two. So, and hence the worry that life-centric design is just a trendy word to use. Now, let's very quickly also mention this point that, and this is important, that science or technology or design are not value neutral. So, when designers say that, look, I'm not into understanding all this, for me, it is important to use a good design process and design products, then you're actually not, anywhere near human centered design or life centered design. So, you have also no business talking about it. And also, design is required to constantly reassess the reasons to invest ourselves in design. Or if you're a scientist, then you must keep asking, why am I doing science? Or if I'm a technologist, I must ask, why am I doing technology in the first place? So if we had kept asking that question, we would not have, moved, deviated to the path that I just talked about. And you will understand why I'm talking about that with such a strong sense of, purpose today. The erosion in values that were brought about by the technology's dominance over nature and human and digital technologies actually speeded up the domination over human beings and nature, because it was completely different from our biological systems. I talked about it last time. Actually brought about, led a group of scientists, and scientists such as evolutionary biologists, computational scientists, climate scientists, etc., along with social scientists from areas of cultural studies, sociology, social anthropology, etc., to cognitive psychology. That was a very important area, linguists, to ask, can we continue, therefore, to call the Homo sapien a human, living in an age of humanism, or because as long as we pretend we are all full of humanism, we're not going to change. So they asked, if can we continue to call the Homo sapien human, or is there a need to rename this entity to reflect the new realities? Now, what actually happened subsequent to that is very important. The wanting to change the nomenclatures actually grew a kind of movement. A whole bunch of scientists that included Nobel laureates actually got together at some point in time to stamp down on a, decide on a nomenclature and put this stamp on it. So the reason why they wondered if this should happen is because they were appalled to see that most of the things that matter to us on an everyday basis, which is industry, which is media, which is many thought leaders who come out and speak quite irresponsibly, but we look up on them because they're heads of computing companies, they're heads of large financial consulting companies, etc. There was no actually nobody was actually reminding us anymore that some of the things that we are supposed to know, that we already know, but we know, since if you don't talk about something for a long time, you forget. So one of the things that we do know is that all species, actually, in the larger scheme of affairs of nature, all species co-evolute and coexist in a web of interdependencies to maintain nature's balance. This interdependency was recognized by a particular branch of computational science called cybernetics in the 70s, which I mentioned in the course of talking about evolution of design and the Club of Rome, gatherings. So this nature's balance is actually what is called ecology, where the complete sense, so where species co-evolute and coexist, uh, and create this interconnection through a chain that connect one with the other, uh, creating a web, like a netting system, which is called a web. And in this case, it's called the food web, because what happens there are certain that the bottom layers which have more of a species than the layers above them which have less, and the whole ecology then looks triangular, is where the top layers feed on the bottom to sustain themselves and to keep this balance going. So, for example, if you did not have enough reptilian population in our ecological system, the number of rodents would go completely out of control. and then you would not know what to do. It would go destroy economies actually. Rodents are rats, and reptiles are snakes. So that natural relationship between snakes and rats is important. So it's important to maintain. So since the machine age, man has done everything actually to subvert this food web, because and the way it has done is by over harvesting species that it simply decided it likes. So the subverting, the dominating of this interdependency, and destroying the interdependency was actually done quite randomly through a set of pleasure activities, leisure activities, such as wearing furs. So you had to kill a lot of animals to take out furs, or you had to kill a lot of elephants to take their tusks to make them into jewelry and fancy little artifacts, which were not at all important to daily life living. You also did this for leisure purposes. So you went hunting, shikar, and you just like that killed animals and tigers and leopards and brought back their, horns, deers. You brought back their horns and you brought back their leather, and you skinned them and you kept them as carpets for trophies, etc. Or you did it for food. I mean, not necessary food, but simply because you want to eat that particular food at that point in time. So you overfished, so you killed whales, you killed deers, you also kill deers for their musk and things like that. And of course, we know that a lot of animals today in Africa and elsewhere are killed, and then, they're quietly exported to China, because they believe in, maybe other economies too, they believe in aphrodisiac. Certain things from these animals, help make aphrodisiac and things like that. So, in the process, in the mere 500 years, when life centric and human centric design stopped being practiced, we have actually managed to reach ourselves to the sixth extinction phase, the sixth phase of extinction of species, where a single species, which is the human, which is the Homo sapien, has managed to kill the largest number of species possible within the shortest period of time. Whereas in the 6 billion years and the 600 million years ago, while all the live species were being were evolving, we had five phases of extinction, and all of those extinction phases happened because of natural causes. For example, ice age, that killed, that made a lot of species disappear. It happened because of volcanic activities, it happened because of meteoric activities, but it did not happen because of any particular species killing another species. That the first time that happened was when humans came in as dominant species and started exterminating to such an extent that today we have reached the sixth phase of extinction, and not something that anybody can be, proud of. So, therefore, it is this extremely worrisome proclivity, the tendency of the human to dominate and kill other species, uh, uh, simply for the sake of leisure, simply for the sake of, pleasure, simply for the sake of fancy food, etc. This that we finally find that in such a short period of time, 500 years versus 540 million years, that we have actually extinguished a lot of species. So let's understand that. Yeah. So let's now look at, this is what we have come down to, where you have the human species at the top, and you have all of these species at the bottom at the mercy of the human. We stop at nothing. We are prepared to kill any animal for food, leisure, or pleasure. Whereas the way it should have been is what we see on the right hand side. It should have been a happy coexistence of species, where species constantly evolve to the next stages without getting destroyed. So, for example, we have come from single cellular organisms. Did single cellular organisms stop existing while the human was evolving from single cellular to multicellular to to developing a spine and then becoming mammalian? No, the single cellular continued to exist. So you have the amoeba, you have the amoeba, the plankton in the sea, you have all that, you have the starfish, and you have the complete set of evolution which has co-evolved and coexisted, allowing everybody to evolve and claim its own space. But because of the development that you see on the left side of the screen, the uh, a group of scientists and others met somewhere in 2000. I think it was in 2000. They met in a place called Cuernavaca in Mexico. And they decided the person who sort of spearheaded it was an American chemist called Will Stephen. And they decided that we will rename the Homo sapien to a name that no longer suggests that that Homo sapien has the qualities of humaneness or compassion to nature. We do not have to anymore assume that Homo sapien naturally has those qualities. So let's call it a particular species that is capable of exterminating so many species at the same time. It's capable of being extremely individualistic and selfish to the point of destroying sometimes its own family and, of course, community, etc. What shall we name that species? The name that they came up with was this was the era they decided would be called Anthropocene, where anthropo means human and cene means new. And this extends in the last 500 years, where the last 500 years is the age of Anthropocene, which was the species inside that, the dominant species inside that, the Homo sapien, henceforth will be called anthropocentric. So some very stellar people like Nobel laureate, Dutch chemist, Nobel laureate Paul J. Crutzen, presided over this, but he realized that this term had already been used by an earlier scientist in 1980, Eugene Stormer, who also attended this conference. And then they realized that this term has actually been used by Russian scientists going back into the 60s. So this was the Anthropocene Working Group, the AWG, that along with environmentalists like our very own environmentalist Mahesh Rangarajan and others feel that it's a good thing to today, characterize the Homo sapien as the anthropocentric person with certain characteristics. What characteristics? That they will not hesitate to eliminate other species for no good reason. They will not they will not hesitate to be extremely individualistic and treat their own species badly, as I have mentioned earlier. And they will not hesitate to use technology as a weapon against nature and against its fellow beings. So the anthropocentric human, if you take those as characteristics, and then you say that we need to become life centric, then you know that you have to take a real leap of faith and a very big jump to understand how to get into the phase of life centric. Now, initially, when I asked, what do you think is your reason to become life centric? Is it ethics? Is it morality? Is it sympathy? Or is it sympathy? Is it functional reasons? Or is it a set of scientific reasons? And I batted for scientific reasons, and here is the scientific reason. So, as you can see here, there are this was proposed by a scientist, a biophysicist, Erwin Laszlo, in his book Evolution: The Grand Synthesis, where he, and Erwin Laszlo's views are actually the views of modern evolution post Darwin. A lot of things that Darwin hadn't been able to say, has now been said by scientists like him. So Erwin Laszlo's pyramid says that the bottommost layer many billions of years ago, what got formed was the realm of the physical, which was actually the rivers, the mountains, the molten rocks, etc. And basically, this was in the these were actually physical and physiochemical systems. Geological, then water. Water is actually a physiochemical system because that's how you call it. H2O, and so on. And these were purely in the realm of matter. So the first things that evolved was this large pyramid, the bottom of the pyramid, but very, very large, set of physical sphere, which is of course actually the geosphere. And then you come to the next level, which was about creating, evolving the realm of life. And in that, within that were what was built were the biological systems. And then came the turn of building, evolving or building what was in the realm of the mind. So that got turned into socio-cultural systems, which is actually the top narrow point of the pyramid. And you can see that in terms of numbers, in terms of strengths, we are very small. Socio-cultural is actually the domain of the human. And you can see, if you measure the square area of how much we cover compared to how much the biological layer covers or how much the physical layer covers, it's a very, very small, vulnerable little area. But we are the species with the most amount of arrogance, because we are the species which became aware, and we did not necessarily use our cognate awareness to good purposes in the last few decades, when we got what we call the digital technology, which we sort of weaponized and used it for all kinds of things that actually started destroying the layers below. Not only the life centric, not only the living sphere below us, but also the physical sphere below that. Not only the biological sphere, but also the physical sphere. So now, here is a very simple puzzle. What happens if the top layer gets destroyed? We destroy each other. Simple. Nothing. We just get destroyed. The top layer gets destroyed. The other two layers remain intact. So if we think that we are here to save nature, which is the second layer, and the third layer, then we are mistaken, because all we are doing, what all we are perhaps going to end up doing, is destroy ourselves at the top layer, because that is the most vulnerable layer. But by employing technology in the way that we have, and the way that we have already caused the sixth mass extinction of species, and we continue in that manner, and we do actually pierce and enter the second layer, the biological sphere, and a lot of biodiversity, etc., we have managed to destroy in the way that we have burnt up extensive areas of the Amazon Valley, etc., simply because we want to mine and take out those minerals and build more industry. If you're going to continue in this fashion, then definitely the second layer will also become very vulnerable. So if we think that it's just fine to go on mining, it's just fine to go on killing species, but the first layer where we are sitting is going to be fine. Now, scientifically speaking, that's not possible, because if the second layer goes, both like a pack of cards will collapse. And if the second layer goes, the third layer will remain. And there is no possibility for the second layer to actually destroy the third layer, because in the way that they have evolved, for billions of years they have lived with each other. So the third layer is never going to get destroyed. It is actually only the first layer, and in the manner in which we have continued, it's probably the second layer. But if the second layer gets destroyed, we are certainly going to get exterminated. It is not just the other species, it is the human, lock, stock, and barrel. Now, if we can understand this logic, which is actually a scientific logic, then we know that we are in no position to say save nature. The only thing we can actually do and make the motto of life centered design is to say that we need to actually save ourselves. And in life centered design, the principal question that you ask is, that we forgot to ask, is that or the presumptions we made was that resource was finite. Is that true? No, it's wrong. Is that right? No, it's wrong. Resources have never been finite, have never been infinite. Resources are actually finite. the presumption was that nature could absorb unlimited pollution. Is that true? No. Today, our skies, our waters, you know that the fish are dying because they carry all these plastics inside them. You know, cows are dying because, you know, they're chewing on plastic, etc. So certainly not. The earth is not in any position to absorb unlimited amount of pollution. The third presumption is that a less diverse environment doesn't really matter, you know, but it matters because when you kill most of the animals, the other animals that were supposed to take care of these animals are also gone. So, for example, there are certain pests which are actually killed by other organisms. If you kill those organisms, all you're going to be left with are actually pests, and that is actually happening in many agricultural systems. The fourth presumption is that mass made products through machine, through technology, all of that are extremely good for our bodies. And it can cause no harm. But we do know the computer keyboard, for example, when we spend hours on the computer keyboard, we have something called the carpal tunnel syndrome, which is this part becomes so damaged that you can no longer use your fingers properly. You know that because of the screen, eyes have got damaged, hearing has got damaged because of loud environmental sounds. We know that our cardiovascular systems today are vulnerable because we know ergonomically we are using a lot of products that are not good. So no, we our products will cause a lot of damage to our system. We also presume that technology can become a replacement of nature. We know it is not. And lastly, we presume that society will continue to function well, but society cannot continue to function well if people become individualized and selfish. And that society is bound to, a once cohesive society is bound to crack up in its seams and sooner or later disappear. So now the question is, let's move to how to solve this problem. Okay, let's move. Let's now try to understand why we need to regard this biodiversity, natural life system that we had inherited for two reasons. Okay, the first reason, and both again science based. The first reason is that we actually evolved 600 millions ago from something called the jellycomb, where the first time the jellycomb broke away from sponge, single cellular organisms, where the sponge remained a sponge and the jellycomb evolved through different steps from being single cellular to multicellular to becoming spinal to becoming mammalian to becoming what we are today. And of course, we still have jellycombs, but when the jellycomb evolved, the jellycomb became us. And while doing that, it passed on its nervous system to us. And what it did also was to pass on all its sensory capabilities to us. So if today we have sensory capability, we have the five sensories, they've actually come from the jellycomb. If we destroy that, we will not know how to actually use function with our sensory system. So if we want to understand how our sensories work, we actually need to understand how the jellycomb works. So that is the kind of interconnectedness that we are talking about. We cannot afford to talk about life-centric design at a superficial level of, okay, let's instead of making plastic cups, let's make paper cups. It's far deeper than that. Okay. The second thing is that there is a fantastic sense of there is a fantastic set of inheritances we have got from the animal world, and that is so before we very quickly point out to those, I just want to ask, so if we have gotten all these inheritances from the biological sphere below us, then should we actually is the human really that important after all, or are we challenged into sharing the credits of creativity with our non-human animal world by actually at least acknowledging our inheritances of the evolutionary process, because many of the things that we do today are what we have actually inherited from them. You know, we without thinking we do certain things, and that the reason why we do them without thinking is because they become innate to us. So for example, we have learned, it has been scientifically established about 10 years ago or less, that our tool making comes from the way birds make tools. They pick up little things from different places and they put together. And it's absolutely fascinating to understand how birds did it, to understand how eventually humans did it. Some years ago, a chimpanzee was given an iPad, and the chimpanzee managed to use it just fine without even the basic lessons given to the chimpanzee. Snails, for example, respond to danger by withdrawing into their shells. And many of our, so we have built habitats. We have built habitats and we withdraw into habitats when there's thunder, rain, storm outside as a natural, innate response to getting into something which will protect you from something else. We also have porcupines sensing danger and sending out their thorns, the sticky, the sharp edges, and that is how we have built a lot of our weapon systems, etc. We know that there are animals that protect themselves by releasing odor. So many of our technologies are like that. We know that. So, for example, cooking gas. The odor in it is actually artificial. The reason it's been given so that is because if there is a leakage of gas, by smelling it, you will know you're in danger. So that those are the various uses of sensories. We also know that elephants retain information through memory processing, and that's why it's called elephants' memory, because they can remember everything. Hence, the recent interest in the design community has been, of course, to understand how non-humans have impacted human systems, and a lot of biomimicry, biotic kind of designs have taken place. And within that, there are certain parts of the design system have tried to understand the animal human interconnectedness and see if they can build their systems accordingly. Now, in terms of life-centric design, let me now show you two models of life-centric design, which uh, through which we may understand how we can apply them to two models of life-centric design approaches, which can then perhaps work for us depending on where we are. My only the image here is connected to the animal human connectedness. This is actually a young male elephant that has been sent out of the herd to fend for itself, because it is a little bit like how our adolescents are. And at some point in time, we say that now you have to go look after yourself. So the young male elephant is then required to form its own herd, procreate, find a female partner, procreate, create children, create its own herd. We also you can see here, you can see animals, elephants lined up to drink from a pool of water. This when I present you a model of life centric from our own culture, this would be something from Africa, where there's a term called Ubuntu, which takes the metaphor of the common pool of water where animals come to drink, and they never actually attack each other. Even if there's a tiger drinking with elephant with a smaller animal, when they're actually drinking, they never attack each other. So Ubuntu is a very powerful metaphor for commons, where common resources are meant for all. Let's move on to the. I'm going to. We don't have the time, so I'm just going to ignore these. Let's go to the next slide. Okay, let me talk a little bit about these things here. The print is really small, so I have to get the file, those two files. So here is a set of slides that I'm going to show you from the Copenhagen Institute of Interaction Design, which is a very reputed place. And it's talking about life-centric design, where just a minute, let me just take out my it's so some of the it's kind of thinking is what I'm going to be talking about here. So it says that paradigm shifts are normal, where you move from mono capitalism to multi capitalism, and by that it means mono capitalism being talking only about this very functional thing of finance, but multi capitalism is where you talk about financial, human, social, intellectual, and the natural world. So that is the interconnected ecosystem. Metabolism focused on growth, or metabolism focused on repairing and maintaining, which is actually nature. And of course, focus on processing speed alone, or also look at size, energy consumption, where it is manufactured, all those concerns that we should actually be raising. We are also talking about what is possible and what is purposeful. Just because something is possible doesn't mean you have to do it. And the moment you move into the larger realm of purposeful, you also know that things become cyclical and organic. Then we move on to the next level where they're talking about, the interconnected whole, which becomes a circle against the one where entities get divided and sit in atomic, atomized little sections. That is called atomized, where everything breaks up and takes on its own little, place, and it becomes isolated from each other, whereas this is integrative. The problem with this, just to get back to the previous slide, the problem with this is that the structure is right, but the content is not. Do you find anything to do with nature, life systems, etc., inside the integrated whole? Because we're still talking about governance, we're still talking about everything to do with the human being. There is nothing to do with nature out there. As we move on to the next, this is a very interesting slide because it talks about the zones where you create resilience and the zones where we remain fragile. The less diversity we have, the less numbers we have, the more the fragile. As I mentioned in the in Laszlo's pyramid, and the more the diversity, the more the numbers, the more the resilience of a system. Now we as we move on, we also look at mono versus multi, where you're talking about, we talked about, the multi-capitalism versus mono-capitalism, centralized versus distributed. Today, we have technologies in the country where we've been able to, send money, taking it away from the middleman and placing it directly in the hands of the poor, direct remittances, because the technology has become distributed. So a poor, like an economically underserved person sitting in the village, can still receive money, because all he or she has to go to do is use his or her mobile phone, or go to the bank, and he or she will directly be given the money. You don't need this, the centralized, agents who will be there, and then he will send paisa nahi aaya, 3 mahina baad aao, and then he'll eat up most of it. So these are the benefits of distributed systems. And then they use the analogy of the seahorse versus the unicorn. When billion dollar companies get startups get funded, and become their worth become $1 billion, their underlying worth. Those are called unicorn companies. Unicorn companies are basically companies that don't even exist, because unicorn is an animal that doesn't exist. Whereas seahorses is a very ubiquitous thing in the sea, and you can touch and feel it, and its ways. So it's like multiple ways, and then we come to the macro, the meso, and the micro. Micro being the recognition of the organism level, where I talked about the sponge versus the jellyfish, and the meso is the human being, and the macro is, the big geological systems, the mountains, etc. So they're saying that we can no longer afford to remain in the organism. We need to recognize all three, and we need to recognize that we need to look at scaled up scenarios, because nature is such a huge, large, diverse affair. So we need to actually bring in scenarios that are much larger than your mind can even imagine. These are some of the key points of their understanding of human-centric design. There are several other companies, IDEO, etc., talking about it. This one talks about things in interesting ways, and I think our primary response to this would be that they have caught the essence of how to deal with the next level design approach, which is human-centric, to life-centric, but the content inside those structures still remain the directed at humans alone. They are still not able to connect nature with the human, because nature for them is such a it's a very because they've always lived within the paradigm of controlling nature. They're not actually able to value nature with that kind of large heartedness. For them, nature is not such a big deal. If there are floods, we can control them through technology. If there's fire, we can control them through technology. So there is nothing much to be said about that. Whereas humans are huge, it's huge to be a human. And so all of the things that you see there are mostly talk about functional, user centric things. Now, let's look at another model, which is so I call that the technologically mediated model, because they're still talking from the point of view of technology. Now, let's very quickly look at a culturally mediated model. And I've taken the construct, the metaphor of the sacred groves, which is sacred groves have so many names. They're called Tapovan. They're called Vanarai in Maharashtra. They have other names in the south. In Bengal, they'll be called Tapobon. So sacred forests are actually sanctified forest lands and vegetation that were set aside in earlier times, since times immemorial, actually, to propitiate, that is, to honor the tree spirits, the Vanadevatas, that is, the gods of the forests, along with all other elements of nature located within the designated area. That means earth, wind, fire, all of that, the elements of nature, basically rains, clouds, sun, wind, all that. So this practice of conservation through veneration, through converting the space as sacred, and not, mind you, it is not religious. Sacred is a different connotation altogether. It has a different connotation. It is a connotation of trust. So this practice of conservation, through veneration, through homage, uh, follows from principles of nature worship that believe that all forms of lives were sacred, and by venerating them, one ensured their protection. So, in our culture, this is very easy to understand, because we believe that we believe even stones have a life, and we call them, in Bengali, we call them Porosh Pathor, something that you can feel that it comes to life. That is because stones have their own usefulness within the larger realm of affairs. Now, in reality, actually, although sacred groves were predicated on the early belief that God resides in places of natural beauty, in practical terms, sacred forests, actually, the construct is an ecological construct meant to conserve flora and fauna. So simple, okay? And sacred groves continue to persist to this day in India as cradles of ancient rural civilizations. Just to mention that when the tsunami of 2004 had happened, later on, when scientists and others and environmentalists went around the country and those zones trying to understand the scale of destruction, they noticed that all of the places that had sacred forests, which is, for example, lined up along the coast of Kerala, along the eastern coast as well, had all remained spectacularly protected. So also in Sri Lanka. And Sri Lanka, when you go to Sri Lanka, there are these protected mangroves through which they take you on a boat. And in mangroves, you also have the roots of the trees that are so ancient that they go down into the water and come out of water. So it's a fantastic system of wetlands which actually which is very inviting for birds, different kinds of animals, etc., who coexist. Now, if we were to take the construct of sacred forests, then and we look at how these things are built, they go through a certain set of a certain set of stages. Where are these images that show the visuals, rituals, all of that? It's there here. These things. Okay. Unfortunately, we haven't included these beautiful images. So let me just explain to you how the whole system develops. Okay, this is a life-centric system of design. So it starts with storytelling. So you have a patch of forest, and through storytelling, you say that, once upon a time, the god of Indra god came, and this happened, and that happened, and the forest got built. So the origin of the forest is actually conveyed through storytelling, which takes on elements of myth. So you have God Indra, then you have Vanadevatas, you have all kinds of different mystical the entities that are invoked to create a set of myths through storytelling. What is the advantage of myths? The advantages of myths is that myths are not fiction. Myths are actually storytelling that have moved on to the realm of imagination, and there's another word for it which is called imagined reality, where the reality gets embellished, expanded through different kinds of images, which becomes easier for people to remember. So once you build the myths, you move on to the visual realm. Through iconography, you actually paint these. So you have all these forests, etc., take on the form of gods or goddesses or animals. And for example, the pancha the Aesop fables, Pancharatna, for example, they are based on storytelling and myths, where the crocodile comes and tells you, don't do this, and the crow comes and tells you something else. So these were basically the kind of advice that humans would like to give humans. But you know that moment someone tries to advise you, it goes off your head. Whereas if it's said in the form of storytelling, turned into these imaginary realities, then it stays in your head for much better, for much longer time. Soon the external visual parameters took on deeper meanings in the form of symbols. So, for example, if you take the um, kalash, we place the kalash filled with water. So, we call it the Purna Kumbh. And we place what do we place? We place the five leaves of the amra leaves, right? So, if you look at amra leaves, the mango tree is a spectacular tree. It gives you food, it gives you wood, and it's a very sturdy tree. So you actually take the five leaves, place them on Purna Kalash. Purna Kalash has what? It has water. The shape of it is, of course, the lota, which is design wise almost perfect. And here you have representations of two life systems. One is water, and one is a form of food. And that's how it goes for so many different things that take on symbolic representation. And before long, those have come to be regarded by you. You no longer can, for example, neem has its own place, turmeric has its own place, because when you, for example, when there's a wedding in the family, you place vermilion and turmeric before you send out the cards. It's the first thing you do, right? So turmeric is a lifesaver, and this was a way to tell people that treat turmeric with care. Turmeric is something that you need to worship, you need to honor. And likewise, for so many, tulsi, for example, tulsi is a healing plant. So what do? We place the tulsi carefully in its own space. We water it every day. We even do tulsi vivaha. These are all part of. So that is like the when symbols become ritualized behavior, and you do tulsi vivaha. You do, going around the Vata once a year to do the marriage of the tree. These are all ways to actually remember what these things do for us. And soon these places of ritualized behavior become sacred spaces, venerated spaces. And the venerated spaces tell you of belief systems. They tell you that you're not to kill these things, you're not to mime these things, you're not to overuse these things. You are to use these with care. You are to share these things. You are to use them prudently. You are to use them only at the correct time, correct place. And a whole system that has got built, you notice that the movement is actually a spiral. movement. So you, and then once again, when you believe, when you've built your belief system, then you can go on building a fresh set of icons through storytelling, etc. Because nature grows, new things come up, you get to see and you build them. Now, I learned, many years ago, I attended what is called a forest tribunal where Medha Patkar had come, the person who fought for Narmada Bachao. And I was actually invited because I presented a paper on industrial estates and how local places were getting destroyed. And they said, why don't you please come and attend? So I'd gone. And I spent a whole day just being quiet and watching. There were these people who work with those in sacred forests, protecting sacred forests, who are all there. And they had come from Dahanu, all these tribal places. And there were people from cities who had many years ago abandoned and gone and lived with the tribals. And together they had protected these places. That is the day I learned that in sacred forests, you don't, a sacred forest is closed during the period of monsoons, 3 to 4 months. And they say that when you enter the sacred forest at that time, something will happen and you will die. You will not come out alive. The reason why it's closed for those few months is because that is the time for it to be generative, regenerative. That is when the rains come, biodiversity happens, everything is very fragile and young. So if you walk on them, you will spoil species. If you don't and you let them grow and you go back later, you can enjoy the fruits of the forest without over harvesting, and so the forest remains a forest. You get your food, you follow, observe and follow the rules, and you come out and you protect. So if so for 150,000 years, these were the rules of protecting our environments and taking out only what needed to be taken out. So that's called a regenerative economy, where, for example, they say, in at least in Maharashtra, that you do not eat fish in the months that don't have a R in it. So January, February, March, April, you have R. You can have fish. May, June, July, August. You do not have a R inside, so you're not supposed to eat fish. Then September, October, November, December. Simple. This is how myths develops. A simple thing here is that those 4 months is when fish lay eggs, and if you over harvest, you will lose fish. The population of fish is vulnerable at that point in time. So this is how you build your stories. You build a set of rules around these stories and myths. You give them external expression through visual imagery, and then you create these rituals like butter rickshaw going around the tree. You have all that, and then those actually carry a set of value system which have got built over the centuries. So you don't have to keep doing it every day. You already know. You, for example, you know you have the in the Vishwakarma Puja, which and you have the Vijay Dashami, on the day of Vijay Dashami, for example, in labs. If in IIT it happens, at in IDC workshop, in other labs, there is puja offered. Now, scientists from the West would wonder what that is, but it's a very simple thing. It is actually showing homage to something that is given back so much to you. On Vijayadashami day, you put marigold flowers and you deck up the car, or you deck up your cycle, or you deck up your motorbike, which is simply to acknowledge that this has given you mobility. This is a very useful thing. It is not to be thrown, it is to be treated with care, it is to be used, it is to be used carefully. So if you have, so now let me kind of conclude by saying that if you feel more affinity with a model like this, that is what you need to practice, because you also need to understand that every part of this model is actually motivated by social design. You don't do any of this individually, you do these in groups. Very quickly, and it is all entirely life centric, with nature woven into human activities, where nature is given precedence over human. I would like to conclude by showing you work done through typography, on the theme of nature, which we had floated in 2015 for an international community. It is every year we do it through Typography Day, an event that we hold. But on that particular year, we said typography and nature because we were hosting an international conference on sustainability and we thought that we would actually be able to share this with the international community that was going to come down. But the community that does the typography works itself is international, and you'll see that people from different countries have contributed. So over here there is a young Indian student, if I remember correctly, she is Abhijit from NIT, right? He had come to do his masters in IDC. He had participated, and this is actually a jury, blind jury competition. So we don't know who's actually participating. So you can see it is written nature type, but when you see it from a distance, you see green lines, and you feel that it's actually a green patch. The Abhijit's thing earlier on was how we are imprisoned in urban areas, and he's used the word for nature, the letter for nature, the first letter for nature in Malayalam, and how that has got intertwined through these urban imprisonment, these bars, and trying to actually make you understand that there is something more to just remaining imprisoned in these environments. Okay, let's move on. We also have, you'll see the name of the country there, and this, of course, is in Arabic. Let's move on because there's not much time to explain everything. Here you can see that the tree has gotten uprooted, and this is from Iran. And there is this whole tragic consequence of the ground tree getting uprooted, the entire ecosystem, in a sense, getting uprooted. And he has actually used Nashtalik to depict the catharsis. This is, you can see, this is from India, and you can see the wordings over here. It is save oil spills. Um, let's and everything has been done through typography. Let's move on. Mhm. Over here, this is fantastic. This shows the balance of the organisms that are supposed to be balanced and respected in their respective places. So it says global warming. When you haven't maintained that balance, what you end up with is global warming. And hmm? What will stop reading and start. Yeah, and of course it says stop reading and start acting. And that is my question to you. Are you really constantly talking about social design, or are you actually doing it without ever talking about it because your life is about social design? Here you have environment, and you again, this is from Iran. You have from Portugal, which is actually what I've forgotten. Delicate. This is delicate, right? Yeah, this is fragile. Yeah, the fragility of the earth, how it shows how earth is very fragile. This is also this is from Cyprus. I remember this one. It talks about existence essentially. But it also, yeah, it actually talks about different layers of the environment, and it uses different kinds of green. Cyprus is a country which is very strong on typography, by the way. This one is fleeting. It is from the USA. It shows how things are sort of breaking up and getting diffused. Uh, this is from Japan, and the interconnectedness of life through a particular, the type that she has used. The word connotes nature. This is also from Iran, which shows, and the word environment. This is up in flames. Um Global warming. Next one. This one is from India. Go to the next one. This is harmony through a beautifully set of lines placed there. And ambigram also. Ambigram is where you write backwards. So if you look at harmony, you can. So this is HARMONY, and this is HARMONY. So this is a complete ecosystem within itself, well functioning ecosystem. This is, of course, the idea of broken. It's from UK. And as you can see, this one is actually restore. So they've written restore, but you can see that slowly the grass is growing back. It's beautifully done. It's from USA. And this one is actually from, it's not actually from USA. The person is actually Ethiopian. And the sacred idea of leaf, he has used the sacred idea of leaf to build the poster. Here you have the depend roots and roots and top growth. Let's go to the next one now. This one is where the tree is dispersing its leaves in the form of letters. This one is actually beautiful. It's leaf and it's from Russia. It's leaf with Russian writing inside, and overall it's a depiction of nature. This is also about leaf. Um, in again Nashta Lake, if I remember correctly. This is like the digital tree, the digital forest, where it doesn't. It's a binary forest. It doesn't do much for the environment. This is electricity, nature and plants, nature and electricity. This one is actually when you cut a tree and you see the lines, and you see the lines broken. Ravi, the next, can we go back to the previous one? It says, please protect nature. Don't cut trees like this. That means you've destroyed life form and so on. We could actually. So this was here. You're showing agua and terra from Portugal. They have Spain and Portugal constantly refer to agua and terra through their food. So they say food from the sea, food from the mountains. So the symbiotic relationship between the two. This one is from China. Sounds of nature. They've used the words for sound in the landscape. This one, of course, is very powerful because you've actually taken forms of life and you've bottled them, like you bottle them in ammonia or something, and it's like in laboratory now. It can no longer grow, it's just for you to see. Um, this is pond water. Uh, this was done by a East European young student who also had animated it. At one level, you see the tiger and the elephant, but every bit of the lines is actually a letter form. When you put together, it's the elephant. When you take away the letter form, there's nothing. So it has very powerful messaging in it. I will end with an international exhibition on H2O water, which had originated in Italy, and we had become partners to it, where most of the entries are actually from Italy, but it has very powerful symbology to it. You can see a bathtub in an arid place. There's no longer any use for the bathtub. You can see this earth with no water and empty glasses on the side. The reason for me to want to show you this is that this is Italy has very sophisticated modernist design and postmodern design, and their concern for water is equally great. So Italy that way is also a very also a softer culture. So the depiction of life centric, there is some sign of that life centricism in it. When you see the right side poster, you can see that there is so little rain left that and there's so much of respiration happens in the environment that if you don't put funnel and take away the water at the right time, there won't be much water for the earth. This is, of course, the primordial soup, which is, the origin of earth was considered to be this whole churn. And in the 1500s, there was a scientist who tried to simulate that by creating a mixture that pretty much showed how the earth was formed, and that was called the primordial soup. And so the primordial soup here is made up of all these chemicals you can see on the side. It's a takeoff on the kind of food that we eat, full of preservatives. Uh, piggy bank is meant to, save. You put in coins to save. Now you have to start saving water. We go to the next one. that's a drop of water. This says una source, one source. There's just this one source of water, one glass of water. The image on the right is very, very powerful. The chemical formulation for water is H2O, and by adding an N and a arid land in the background, you say there is no more water. It's become H2O has become H2 no. And here, of course, there's a tap of water, and all water is gone, and all you have is dry land. So, no matter how much you turn on the tap, there's going to be no water. There is a dry earth, you've gone under the shower, and all you will get is drops of water, dry mud. On the right is water filled with the oil slicks. So, and in a corner, you have a little water left. On the right side is actually a Coca-Cola bottle. It's a bottling plant factory. It shows a bottling plant factory close by. And you do know that our environmentalist, what's her name? Sunita Narayan from Delhi, and others had fought with to save the environment of water depletion in Kerala and other places where every time Coke or Thumbs Up set up a bottling plant the Coca-Cola would be made, it would actually suck up all the water from the ground level. So this is an that kind of messaging. On the left side is a very cute messaging, which is very, very romantic messaging, where once upon a time you took a rose to your sweetheart. Now you take a bottle of water with a heart on it. This is sitting in San Francisco. So you can see that the concern for life-centric design has to be articulated with great deal of seriousness. It is not going to happen in a single day. It's not going to happen with a single model. And my intention to show you two diverse sets of models is also to say that when the Industrial Revolution happened, what also happened with the Industrial Revolution was that all of the storytelling, etc., that I showed you, that we as a culture are fortunate to continue to have, were actually got wiped out of the industrial landscapes, and it was called the process of demythologizing because the life had become so functional that there was actually no room for storytelling. Storytelling, etc., were considered a waste of time. And 200 years since then, UK, America, European continent, they realized that their mythologies, except in small places, have actually got wiped out. It's important to understand that life-centric models or so-called models that are getting built in the West will not actually be fit for us because we are actually a mythologized, we are a land rich with mythologies, rich with life-centric practices, and rich with an understanding of nature as something that needs to be venerated and where everything has a life form. The snake is worshipped, the tree is worshipped, the leaf is worshipped, stones are worshipped. So that system is very different from a system, an industrial system, where these things are considered to be simply, physical things that once are done are to be simply thrown away. So their models naturally cannot work for us. But the other way around, if you look at, is holds great promise. This is finally the time for you to actually build models and and give them to the world because you already live in a system which has this fantastic a tradition legacy of understanding nature. You are eminently in a position actually to build these models and pass them on to these design companies. It cannot happen the other way around. We do not have to take those models because they are incomplete. They are still they're very materialistic. They're highly functional, and they do not actually integrate or invoke nature in any way. I would like to end on a very positive note to say that today is your time. Today is finally the world is slowly waking up to the potentials of India, and they call India the capital of environmental practices, the capital of environmental related NGOs. And we have seen stellar people do all this. So many Magsaysay awardees, so many Nobel laureates, others who have talked about this, practiced this, You live in the midst of it, and it is for you today to build life-centric design models based on life-centric design approach, and pass them on, practice them, and pass them on to others. So, with that, on that note, Manish, I end this presentation.
Thank you. Thank you, ma'am. Amazing, amazing journey. And you are presented through the lots of experience, lots of experiments also, and with the examples. That is really amazing. And there is, madam, one question came from one student. Hopefully, you are in this. What are the major reasons behind the rapid technological advancement in past few centuries in comparison to time before 500 years?
Okay,
The question is
that
that
is
what are the major reasons behind the rapid technological advancement in past few centuries in comparison to time before 500?
correct. And that's a really good question. So you're actually saying that we had 150,000 years, and suddenly in the past two, three, 4 centuries, we have had all these technological advances. There are actually two major watersheds for that. The first watershed, which is called the scientific revolution, is an obvious watershed which happened starting from around 1500, 1600, when you had scientists like Copernicus. It actually, they say it started with Copernicus because he was able to understand that the earth is not geocentric, the earth is heliocentric, that the center of the earth is not the earth, it is actually the sun, and we move around the sun. So starting from that point onwards, you had Galileo, you had Newton, you had all these scientists come out and change the complexion of the reality, the physical reality outside, all of which turned out to be the way it is, with minor changes here and there, minor nuance. And then you had Darwin and others coming. They say that the scientific revolution of the 15th, 16th, 17th century lay the stage for the industrial revolution because it gave you the scientific basis to build steam. It, because technology is always a derivative of science, it is not the other way around, excuse me. So all of that scientific knowledge, it was a threshold amount of scientific knowledge that finally went and became you know uh, got together and burst into what we call the industrial revolution, because revolutions are always sudden. But the less obvious set of reasons behind the scientific revolution, and you'll be surprised what that is the contributions that were made by Arabic mathematicians, and before that Indian mathematicians. Indian mathematicians did had their innovations a long time ago, Aryabhatta and others, which were then carried to the Middle East through traders and scholars. And you know that Al Jabr had built algebra, which was somewhere around the 1100, 1200. And Westerners had, the traders from Italy, scholars from Italy, scholars from also Europe had started coming to the Middle East, because many of them were going to China through the Silk Route, and they would have to stop in Syria, in Damascus, in Aleppo. Aleppo was one of the biggest stopovers on the Silk Route. It was a fantastic city that got demolished because of the Syrian war. But because of this fusion between East and West that happened in the Middle East, a lot of the Middle Eastern innovations got taken away from the Middle East into Europe, into a kind of cradle of reasoning and rational thinking, because Middle East was plunged into darkness, the Europe was plunged into darkness, the medieval times. And so when these things got carried into Europe, and the age of reason had already come, they were able to capitalize on these, and then they burst out into a series of discoveries and scientific discoveries, which then resulted in the industrial revolution. So the chemical basis of steam, the mechanical basis of the crankshaft, etc., happened because of the scientific revolution.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you. Hopefully, the answer is given by you very well. Now I'm again thanks to the participant for active participation in this Fundamental of Social Design course, and a special thanks to ma'am for the continuous support from their side for this wonderful lecture and knowledge giving things to us also. Ma'am, once again, thanks to you, and hopefully we will meet in the next week with you with new topics. Thank you, participants.
And
Thank
new
you.
assignments. We will send new
Yes,
assignments, Manish, for
absolutely, absolutely. Yeah.
right. Okay, so
Thank you,
thank
ma'am.
you, participants, for coming on a Saturday, and thank you for being there. Thank you, Manish, for organizing this.
Thank you. Thank
Bye.
you, ma'am.
Bye. Everybody stay well.